Joe, thanks for joining me today, and great to see you. We've been friends for a long time, and you've got one hell of a story to tell. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your background and your story, because it's really interesting for people.
Yeah, sure. Colby, it's great to see you again. It's great to be here. Well, the story is simple. In 1989, I pushed a shopping cart around Vancouver's downtown east side. I was homeless, struggled with mental health, addiction, poverty. And, I bounced around the streets for over a decade trying to find my way, trying to find my possibility. When the pandemic hit last year, I found myself in real familiar emotional territory because for years I dealt with anxiety and fear and woke up to problems that didn't have solutions. Fortunately, I had some people in my corner who, really rooted for me. One of those was my mom. Mom brought me back to Ontario. I went through a detox and recovery process, enrolled in college, got into, alcohol and drug recovery, and went back to school. And in less than 3.5 years, I graduated with honors. And I got my first job in sales, selling business equipment for Minolta, Canada. And that led to another position in the audiovisual industry. And then that led to an entrepreneurial position. I had a friend, come to me and say, hey, let's start this company. It was the late 1990s. The tech sector was exploding. And so I said, sure, what have I got to lose? And I put my head down, and over the next couple of years, we built a company beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And in less than 12 years, I went from a heroin addict in the downtown east side to having more success than I could ever imagine. Now, I think the takeaway from the story and the thing that I like to teach the most is that inside all of us is way more than we can see. When I was on a park bench years ago, I met this guy named Gus. And I remember at the time I was homeless, addicted to drugs, I had dirty black fingernails. And I remember him saying to me, he said, Joe, there's more to you than you can see. And what I didn't understand, and I think this is really important for parents, for leaders, for entrepreneurs, is to work towards a possibility mindset. You see, what Gus saw in me was something that was underneath the surface. We look at the world, especially now in the pandemic, as we see it the way it is and what it'll likely be tomorrow. The problem is there's no innovation in that. There's no possibility. The disruptive technologies of the last decade have been people who looked at the world not as it was, but as it could be. Yeah. And so possibility mindset is saying about myself and the world around me is, where are we going to be tomorrow? Where could I be tomorrow? Because we have absolutely no obligation to be the same people we were yesterday.
So I know, Joe, you've had a lot of people that sort of helped you get back on your feet. Negative stories around policing these days, many of them justified, and a lot of concerns from the public. But I think your story has a lot of positivity around that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your interactions with police and how that helped move you in the right direction?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, living in the streets, being involved in illicit drugs, I didn't have positive interaction with police for many years.
I think I heard you refer to yourself as a liar, a cheat, and a mooch, which always puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, liar, thief, cheat, and a mooch. And that's kind of who I was. I was a taker. I looked at the world and saw, what can I get out of it? If I would have come across you in those days, you were a mark. You were someone that I could get something from. And that really didn't have so much a reflection of me, because I'm not that man today. It really had a reflection of the addiction, right? Because
just the desperation of the situation.
Yeah, driving that behavior to get drugs and find ways and means to get more. But when Mom brought me back to Ontario, I had a revolving pattern with depression. I still do, but I've got tools now that when it begins to dip, I do certain things to help stabilize my mental health. I've got some stopgaps today, but back then I didn't. And what I used to do is I would use alcohol and drugs, become despondent and suicidal. And one night my mom walked into the room and I was sitting on the bed with a loaded handgun, and she got scared and called the police. So the last person I wanted to see was a cop. That night I met a guy named Constable Scott McLeod. And Colby, knowing what I know today about use of force and how police are trained, I had a handgun that was concealed when he came to my mom's basement. That really could have gone either way. It really could have ended tragically for me that night. But Scott did something different. He, instead of seeing a man who was a threat, he saw a kid who was in trouble, and he diffused that situation. And instead of that ending poorly for me, I ended up getting an ambulance ride to the mental health unit at Royal Victoria Hospital in Barrie, Ontario. What I like to say about this story is that positive police interaction is perennial as the grass is green. Every single day, millions of law enforcement professionals around the world are doing really good work. That's not to say that we don't need reform. We absolutely do. There is a shift and change that's happening. But I think it's important that we tell the good stories with the bad. When I had a year sober, I called Scott and let him know the impact he had on my life. When I graduated college, I called him. You know, when my daughter was born, I let him know, the impact he had in my life. And when I had 10 years sober, I was living out here and I flew back to Ontario and I gave him my 10-year recovery medallion. Scott's probably one of the closest friends I have in the world. And, he retired with 37 years in the force. And he will tell you that the day that defined his career was the night that we met.
Quite incredible, really.
Well, it is. And in fact, yesterday, to that, I was on the call with the director from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And I'm getting an opportunity to share my story across police chiefs across Canada and across the globe to talk about some of these really important public health issues that police are looking to do better with. And I find it, really humbling that, some guy from East Vancouver is, going to get an opportunity to potentially shape policy and thought leadership in that arena.
Now, many years later, it seems like the police supported you on another big challenge when you decided to walk across the country with a shopping cart. Tell us all about the push for change.
Well, as I mentioned, I got to that place in life where, I had a few dollars and I was successful, but I wasn't any more fulfilled inside. I was asking that question of what can I do to pay it forward, to give back to a country that's been so generous to me. And on an airplane ride to Calgary one day, I was working with this business partner, Dr. Sean Richardson. And Sean's a sports psychologist, former Olympic athlete. And I said, Sean, what can we do to raise awareness for kids across Canada and around issues of homelessness and mental health and family conflict and early childhood trauma? I said, no kid in this country should end up pushing a shopping cart in the street like I did. And Sean says, well, why don't you run across Canada, Joe? And at the time, I was about 60 pounds heavier than I am today. But then he said something cool. He said, well, maybe you don't run, you walk. And I said, well, walk. It's been done. Like, what would be different about it? And he said, push a shopping cart.
I think you may possibly own Rolls Royce of shopping carts, I think is what you created for yourself, but good on you for doing it.
And it's a high-end baby carriage for active moms and dads that like to run and cycle. And we took that and transformed it into a cart. That was one of 10,000 problems that needed to be solved over the next 3.5 years. But the day finally came, May 1st, 2016. And I found myself in Cape Spear, Newfoundland, and in front of me was 9,000 kilometers of highway. Just a note on the pandemic. When it hit last year, I remember that fear and uncertainty I had during the push for change. I also remember the stress and overwhelm I had at many periods during the campaign. Pushing a shopping cart through northern Ontario in the wintertime, when the autumn leaves in Ontario started to change color and I was about 3,000 kilometers into this walk, I would wake up and it'd be a bright, beautiful fall day and all I was thinking is,
Winter's coming.
Winter is coming.
It's got to be one heck of a physical challenge combined with one heck of a mental challenge. And talk to us about the physical and the mental. What went through your mind every morning as you rolled out of bed and decided you had to walk another X kilometers to keep moving forward?
Well, I kind of wish that my midlife crisis was a Corvette. What happened for me is when it got tough, And it wasn't just the physical. Physical was only one aspect of it. Yeah, I was 49 years old doing this, sort of an elite athlete thing, but it was the emotional, it was the social, it was the mental wear down. I would walk 24 kilometers a day, but then I would go and speak to 300 kids at a school, or go meet the mayor, or do 2 interviews, one for CBC and one for Global. And so there was just this constant high performance.
Yeah,
And
people today complain about Zoom fatigue. You had real fatigue.
yeah, well, but the emotional and mental is the same. In the arena of sport, you would never go out and do back to back to back to back to back marathons, right? Because you need the recovery in order to get the adaptation, in order for you to get stronger. Yet in business and in the productivity in our worlds, we say that wellness is important, but I got to get this stuff done. And so what happens is we deplete ourselves emotionally, we deplete ourselves mentally, and we don't effectively recover, and we go at it again the next day and the next day and the next day. Once you start bumping up against that stuff, you hit the lower end of the continuum on stress and burnout.
Yeah, and you don't even realize that you're bleeding off that productivity. It just becomes less and less productive, and you get yourself into all sorts of danger zones, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And if you look at the world of professional sport, the best in the world do not ignore the wellness stuff. Tom Brady's not winning Super Bowls at 43 because he's pushing too hard through adversity. It's because he's getting the right sleep, getting the right nutrition, getting the right mental downtime. He's doing all the things that are necessary to keep himself performance ready, but also understanding that well-being is the foundation of performance, not a separate thing over here.
One of the things I've seen and learned in myself in the last year is it's easy in this new world to have way more interactions with people. And I love these conversations. And one of the things that I found challenging, but also something I need to be mindful of, is having enough slack time between my meetings. So I've become really disciplined about 30-minute meetings with 30 minutes in between, just so I have time to decompress. But the whole back-to-back meeting dynamic is not good for people. The upside is we can really see and engage with a lot more people, but you also need to manage your schedule.
You know what it is, Colby? We call it energy health management. And there's decades of research that shows if you put 2 people in a room and give them intense work to do and don't give them a break, the group that has to keep going without the break doesn't do as well as the group that gets the break. Go outside, get in the sunshine, have a cold glass of water and some healthy snack. And by doing that, you're actually feeding into the recovery process that the body and mind needs to then go at that task again.
I think autonomy is really important for people. And as a business owner, I have enough autonomy to decide when I'm on and when I'm off. And I think as business leaders, we need to be mindful of our people. Team members who are just constantly being asked to attend meetings that they don't have control over, and they get out of cycle. They're not the masters of their own domain anymore, and that can drive into a black hole and a productivity loss very quickly.
It's a big topic on there's 2 things. There's energy health management, and there's also resiliency building. Why are some people doing well and others aren't? Why is this person this way and this person's that way? It has a lot to do with the path that we've traveled up to here. Some people have resiliency, and they've been through, maybe they were involved in sport as a kid, or they had really good parents. But let's face it, not all childhoods are created equal. And I wasn't always a resilient guy. I had a fixed mindset, but it took time to practice to build a growth mindset. So there's a formula that you can teach to show people how to build resilience. First of all, resilience isn't an arrival point. You don't get to the parking lot of resilient and I'm resilient now and away I go. Resilience is a continuum you move up and down on. I have days where I'm incredibly non-resilient.
Yeah.
But I know what to do, and I have an effective habitualized set of patterns and things that I can do to move up that continuum quickly.
Well, and I think you're aware enough that you understand that having days of low resilience is part of the cycle, and
right.
and it's part of the journey. And I interviewed my friend Ed Choi recently about what he does to be productive at home, And, you know, he says it all changed for him when he looked at remote work as a lifestyle. Once he mentally embraced that as being a cycle that he had benefits and lesser benefits from, it changed his thinking and allowed him to really lean into that and basically focus on becoming good at it.
I think you're right. Failure isn't what we think it is. Failure is feedback. And if you look at the high performers and elite athletes, they take every single adversity and they turn it into an asset. Don't waste good adversity. Right now, I'm excited because all of us have been thrust into uninvited adversity the last 14 months. Yeah. Every single one of us is like where I was 30 years ago, sitting on a park bench going, what the heck am I going to do next? Get to a time in a year or two from now, we're going to look back. A couple things we're going to have is we're going to have tools that we didn't sign up for, but we have them now because we weathered that storm. Second thing, we're going to have an appreciation for calm water. And third, our neural pathways in our brain are going to know how to intuitively solve problems when they come at us.
Right.
Because we've been through this process. And I think the very most important thing that an individual or an employer or an entrepreneur can encourage people to do is connect to purpose and help people to get into action.
One thing that we've found really helpful on our team, and I encourage other business leaders to consider it, is we've always done a daily huddle, but just having that checkpoint with people creates so much alignment and emotional health, I think, within the team. But I remind them that, you know, if it wasn't for that, many of us may go months without talking to other members of our teams just because we have no express and direct reason to connect with certain people on our teams. But having a touch point where we can check in, have a little social time, see how people are doing and talk about what's going on at work allows us to really rally around each other and move stuff forward. And I know that's been a really useful technique for us. And any other advice on how leaders and business managers can help their teams thrive?
There's two things that I spend most of my time in. One is how to build resilience, and one is the energy health management. Understand that, you know, different people are at different ends of the spectrum. It's really good to sort of separate the person from the behavior. If someone's struggling, I want to address the behavior, not the person. First of all, let's identify what's really going on, because oftentimes something will present itself and that's not what's really going on. So I use a formula called AIR. R is the roadblock. You know, what is this individual having trouble with? The next is this individual or team connected to purpose? And their purpose may be different than the company's purpose. But, you know, that whole Simon Sinek thing becomes really important. People ask, how did you walk across Canada? You know, 11 million steps, 17 months, 1 Canadian winter. I knew why I was doing it every morning. And nothing to do with walking across Canada. It had to do with kids like me who are falling through the cracks, who I didn't feel should fall through the cracks. A is action, I is inspiration or purpose, and R is roadblocks, recognizing that things are going to get in the way. What I do is I try to coach people and when they're stuck to connect to purpose and take action. Because over time, what will happen is resilience gets built. And so as a leader or a coach, as a dad, as a community leader, that's what I'm looking for. Get you to take 1 or 2 steps, connect to purpose, and acknowledge that roadblocks are part of the way. Now, on the energy health management stuff, I think that what employers need to do is walk the talk on health and well-being. There's a lot of chatter about mental wellness, but we're still asking people to put performance first and them second. Cannot have an athlete or a peak performer without those things, two things being aligned. And the only way to do that is to attack the cultural things within an organization that are burnout behaviors. And that's tough, especially in fast-moving organizations, and everything is fast-moving right now. So
one of the things that I've really focused on in the last year too, because I believe in it fully, is the idea of autonomy and sort of plan their own days. You know, we have our scheduled check-ins, but I think it's really important to give people, and clearly you need to trust your employees to do this, but give them the freedom to say, you know, do the work that you need to do when you need to do it. I think for too long as a society, we've been shoved into a mold. We've been a square peg in a round hole, shoving the wrong work at the wrong time of day, and really restricting people's autonomy, which ultimately is just a culture and a productivity killer. And, you know, there's a lot of talk lately about corporate culture as it relates to the workplace. You know, ultimately culture is just how we get stuff done and how we treat our people. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for businesses to really relook at their culture as a whole right now, and ask themselves, how can we make it a better place to be while still driving the productivity goals that we all want in the end? Any other thoughts on culture? And
well, I think, yeah, I think you're bang on. I think that culture is, what is culture? Culture is really the collective behaviors and thoughts and actions of an organization, right? Like, I like working in a place that has laughter, but some organizations, laughter is perceived as non-performance, so that's not allowed, that's discouraged. So like, we've got to manage the KPIs and performance and productivity, but I think the most important thing are our people, and I like where we're going. It's all changing again. It's like a new renaissance. This is like the late 60s all over again, where everything is being examined, the bad stuff's being discarded, and we're heading into this wide ocean of possibility.
yeah, I just hope as a society we have enough capability to and discipline to maintain the good stuff. That's my biggest fear right now, is that we're going to fall back into our old ways and not take the time to really capture the lessons that we've learned from this whole situation and ask ourselves, how can we do it differently?
Well, I think that there's going to be folks that don't do well, and then there'll be folks that do. And then there'll always be those sort of lighthouse beacons of, wow, look how that organization did it. And we're good at storytelling, so there'll be good and bad examples. And I think that over time we'll morph and change. The thing that I'm excited about right now is because we have been forced into all this change. This is like, the North American workforce was just forced to train for an Ironman. Yeah. Nobody wants to do it. Tough. You're doing it. In that process, we're learning things about ourselves. And it all comes back to that message Gus gave me. There's more to you than you can see. When we're forced into uninvited adversity, we learn things about ourselves. We learn things about our business. We learn things about the world. Whether it's organic or intentional, we pick up new information and new ways of being. And as long as we treat failure just as feedback, we can move and adjust as we go. We're not going to get it always right. I like where we're going with new workplaces. I mean, I've worked from my home for over 20 years, so I understand all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And as long as the work is getting done, I think that you give people a long tether. When the pandemic hit last year, as a professional speaker, I watched, $250,000 worth of business evaporate. And I was kind of like, okay, that's not good. What are we going to do?
Where do we go?
Yeah. And then I went, okay, wait a minute. And after, a week of panic, I went, wait a minute, there's got to be an angle, because what I know is where there's change, there's opportunity. There's opportunity and investment.
You spend a lot of time speaking to kids in schools, and I think a lot of kids are struggling, especially these days, probably teenagers, where they don't have the social contact and the structure of life that maybe they require at that age. Do you have any thoughts for how those kids or their parents can help facilitate some of the resiliency that might help them get through this time?
Yeah, I think that the conversations I have with my 17-year-old are, what you're feeling is normal and natural. And so you normalize and say, it's okay. It's totally normal for you to feel these different ways. But then going back to that growth versus fixed mindset, the next question is, what can you do? Okay, this is what we can't do, but what can we do? Mm-hmm. And let's get creative. Let's be innovative. Enter into a possibility mindset. And so with my daughter, I've just encouraged her to keep her feet moving, find different ways to connect socially that's, within the parameters of being safe, and continue to do things to keep her not seizing up, right, and getting into that place where she might struggle with depression or anxiety or some of these things. And that's actually worked for her. But, I'm fortunate because for 17 years, I've been drilling into my daughter's head that we live in an effort-based world, that it doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter what's going on around you. It only matters what you do next.
Right.
To any parent, I would get them to read Carol Dweck's book on growth versus fixed mindset. She did this great research, and she showed that there's two kinds of mindsets. The kids that will work hard at a problem, and if they can't solve it, they'll just keep working harder because they believe that they just haven't figured it out yet. Versus the other kids who work at a problem, get to a roadblock and quit, and they feel that they're just dumb and can't figure it out.
Right.
The way the world works is if you keep your feet moving, you will figure it out.
Just as we wrap up here, Joe, I believe strongly in what you're doing and would love to share it with my network of people. Why don't you tell us all how people can reach you and how you can help them at this time? Because I think there's a lot of people and businesses out there that might benefit from your wisdom at this interesting time.
Yeah. So I think the two best ways that I help organizations, Colby, is through virtual speaking and training. One component is, telling my story in the context of resilience, and the other is the energy health management, helping organizations understand what they can do to better balance stress and burnout. That translates into various different types of businesses and speaking opportunities, and I'm doing everything virtually now, and so it's pretty cool. On the foundation side, people can find us at thepushforchange.com and learn more about the work that we're doing with schools. On the speaking side, Skid Row CEO, or they can hit me up on LinkedIn. And I'd encourage folks listening to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm putting lots of good content out there, and it's where I spend the bulk of my time.
Yeah, thanks for that in closing, Joe. Great to see you again. It's been a long but sometimes distant friendship, but it's always awesome that we can reconnect and see each other, and great to see your smiling face and see your updates on social media. So thanks again for your time.
Hey, Colby, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, mate.